All right. So I've been researching MIRC hijacking, which basically what I found is that I do I do research on child trafficking routes. And I found that they were like in the past they were utilizing Craigslist for messages and ciphers, just like the drug codes with the emoji kind of stuff. But they have like a pretty advanced like method. The more riskier your trafficking gets, usually the more like psycho-y the people. And then with that comes like a massive paranoia that ends up being like it ends up being to where it ends up being that that massive paranoia usually ends up being what drives people to be building a messaging system that's very difficult to actually understand in lots of ways. So what I knew is that the people that traffic children around here, they use similar words. They used to use Experience Project, and that they essentially similar ideas as the drug code stuff, but they have cops that are a part of their organization. And so with that, those cops are basically the ones that look for drug codes on like Craigslist and shit. And that those are usually the people that are, I mean, not all of them, but the ones around here also are always searching the social medias for drug codes. And so what I was able to research is they have like a few different methods. So one is like they'll know one profile or like they'll have like on Similar Worlds. I mean, I've been using it for like weeks now, and that what if you click on somebody's like username, you'll see all the postings that they have. So see somebody like will post the message, and that then they just click on the username, and then there's like a subversive message in all their postings that essentially links together, and that they usually have somewhat of a cipher. So it's like the top posting in their profile or something will have like the second, fourth, and sixth word, and then the next one will be like the 10th word, and then it'll be stuff like that. And so that's essentially where I also started to notice some of the so they use like a second messaging methodology for a lot of their messaging, where the they use like a theming methodology where it could just be like a random posting, but that it'll derive back to a series, a key. It'll derive back to a key, okay? And so with that, the key itself is based in some very simple boilerplate themes. So essentially, the boilerplate themes are what they use when they scan through the postings, and that then certain postings fall into a very concise theme. And then that's usually where part of it is just leaving it out there and then not really making it that easy, but people kind of have to put in some, it's kind of like the ARG kind of stuff. They have to put in some time and effort on some trial and error, and that essentially once they get a grouping of the right postings, then there's somewhat of like a message key for the words. So it's like they get they compile all together these postings, and then some of them might fall into themes, and then the message might not make sense, and then certain ones will kind of be noticed as like a word that just wouldn't have anything, or like is, or on the 10th word, and then those usually get kicked out of their compiling of a posting. And that this is like where is where over time, sooner or later, the posting will make a grammatically correct sentence of some sort. And then that's kind of how they know if the gathering of the postings are like the correct ones. And usually it'll be a time and a place. And that's essentially where a lot of that stuff, it's more for like scheduling child brothel moments. And that usually the people that show up are the ones that like figure out that stuff. And so that's kind of the method that they use. Okay? And so what ends up happening is it ends up being a whole series of profile hijacking and the MIRC itself where they do flag control over the site. It's like I've noticed that they haven't been able, most of them are doing that from essentially the profile itself has like a set of computer coding that they placed in the dark web, and then they interact with the profile from the dark web. So some of the problems that arise from that is that the flag control stuff comes from the ClearNet people that are holding on to specific profiles. Okay? And so the reality is that most of those people that are a part of that are also in the dark web with those profiles also. But they actively use like a ClearNet version. And that's what they do their flag control with. Because you can't actually flag from the dark web. That's one of the drawbacks is that somebody has to actually actively be in that ClearNet profile. So that's how they kind of control who's on the site. They make it really boring and shit so that people go to different sites. I mean, there's a whole culture of people doing MIRC, basically, and that they, if you go on Reddit or 4chan, people have spirited conversations. One of the things that you can tell about the similar worlds is that it's very boring. It's very generic, and that with that, that's kind of It's purposeful. It's made to make if people start using it. It's made to make them view it as like a boring place, and then they move on. That's part of the hijacking aspects. A lot of these ideas get pulled from regional Craigslists that all of these people used to do that stuff on. And that in lots of ways they still are. But they have whole groups of people who literally do that and maintain that kind of control over a MIRC. So one of the things about it is that essentially the person using the main profile changes, and everybody has like an automated, like they kind of have a pre-mapped out posting for like the next week, and then throughout the day different people are logging on to the profile, and that's essentially what pushes the postings, is that there'll just be newer people every day in it, in each one of these kind of posts, in one of these user profiles. And so that's where they're all scheduled to access it throughout the week in an appointment schedule. And so that's what pushes it. And then from that, they basically have like a scripted like posting that has all the stuff, the words are in the correct ways, and pictures and stuff a lot of times mean things. See, the pictures themselves are kind of what pushes it to, it's a whole sex-based world And so some of the themes might push towards a type of pedophilia and shit like that, okay? And so that's the kind of shit that it's like they don't actively promote what their prostitution brothel is, but the themes themselves are what gets used by the people that know about that stuff to determine what type of prostitution moment exists. So if it's like real cute and furry little kittens or something like that, then it'll be like really bubbly like women or something like that that are probably psychiatrically sexually slaved in ways, and that's the culture that does all that kind of shit. They do that stuff. And so then there'll be little kid fantasy kind of shit. I mean, it'll be more like if it was Powder Puff Girls or something like a cartoon, then that would more than likely be like maybe like 8 or 9 year old girls or something. And that's the kind of ways that they use the themes, because a lot of people don't like spending their time looking or doing the ARG shit if it doesn't fall into the types of weird sex that they like, okay? And so that's basically it. And so they, this kind of idea, this is like what they do around here, okay? So I know that it comes from that same group was using Craigslist, but then when they took down the like boners and butthole personal stuff, they like boycotted it or something, Craigslist. And so what that meant was they attempt to use a needed reliance on this process. See, the hijack itself maintains users using it. And so with that, like the Craigslist themselves, they would have suffered a downfall in user hits by taking out the personal butthole dick pic stuff. And what that is that shit was part of like it was part of a hijack, and that those people got pissed off when they took down the butthole pic stuff, and that is what had them punishing Craigslist, and that is where essentially they like to make themselves so needed to sites like this that then a lot of times they like to strong arm the company in ways based on basically being the only users like this similar worlds. I imagine that the only users in lots of ways are probably people that are part of the hijack. And that one of the things else that I noticed is that here I've been posting just constantly things that would be interesting to talk about in all fucking ways. And that what I noticed is that nobody will comment. And see, that's another hijack method. See, if I don't get any, if nobody engages with me, this is meant. It's meant because I'm an outsider, and it's kind of meant that only the people part of the hijack actually have interactions and shit, and that they won't comment on my stuff because I'm like an outsider to their MIRC hijack. And so, yeah, that's the other reality, is that the similar worlds, I mean, is known. I've been doing research on child trafficking and the culture of pedophilia for a long time now. And that the similar worlds is in a second messaging way, in a hacker dark web way, is known as pedophilia Craigslist, kind of. I mean, kind of. It's just known as that. And so that's the kind of stuff where, you know, those people would have like seen my face. Okay. They would have probably taken like a picture and they would have done a facial recognition in the dark web or something. And then they would have noticed that I'm not like an insider. Right? I mean, that's kind of what it is. Those hijacks usually come from a sex group of some sort, okay?